The Lebanese capital has been hit by new Israeli airstrikes. Southern Beirut has come under increasing bombardment in the last 24 hours as Israel steps up its campaign against Hezbollah militants. Lebanon's health minister says that in the past 2 weeks, these attacks have killed more than 1,000 people.
Plumes of smoke billow across Beirut's skyline after a night of heavy Israeli bombardment. On the ground, huge mounds of rubble are still smouldering. This building was targeted by missiles. Residents of the area fear the situation will only get worse.
We were sitting at home and suddenly we heard a loud sound. They had targeted the Islamic Health Organization, which is a rescue service. And all the residents of the building are civilians. They targeted those who tend to the wounded and help others.
Strikes took place in the early hours of the morning. Just shortly after the IDF had issued an alert to Beirut residents to evacuate several neighbourhoods in the south of the city. Israel has stepped up its attacks on Lebanon in recent days in what it says are targeted strikes to eliminate Hezbollah militants and bring safety back to its own northern border. Israel army footage shows what they say are overnight aerial attacks on specific areas in southern Lebanon near the Israeli border. Another IDF clip shows soldiers on the ground in an unspecified location in Lebanon. Following the attacks, Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati denounced what he called the criminal aggression by Israel against the Lebanese people and called for a ceasefire. But Israel says it has now sent a second military division into Lebanon, a sign that its operations there are not slowing down.
Let's go straight to Beirut and join journalist Karim El-Gawhary. Welcome back, Karim. What's going on there?
Well, we had basically several attacks here in Beirut. The one that everybody's talking about was an attack earlier against a building outside the southern suburbs in an area actually not far away from here, not far away from the governmental area, where something was struck that is something like Israel claims a Hezbollah health center. Everyone is talking about it because it's the second time that there's an Israeli airstrike that is not limited to the southern suburbs, to the stronghold of Hezbollah. But we had also attacks in the southern suburbs. One of them was against a media building of Hezbollah. Mind you that we didn't hear much from the Hezbollah media office in the last weeks. They basically went on a low profile. But yesterday, suddenly, they invited all groups, all journalists and all the international press for a tour through the southern suburbs. And it seems that this attack against this Hezbollah media building was today the Israeli answer to this media tour of Hezbollah. Yesterday, Hezbollah itself claims there were no more people in the building. There was nobody even injured. Also, we had a few hours ago an attack what Israel claims was the Hezbollah intelligence headquarters. When I was in the southern suburbs yesterday and on this tour, it seemed to me like it was a complete ghost town. And I guess even Hezbollah abandoned this building and went to other places because that area was completely empty.
OK. Take us to the border, Karim. What's going on there, the border between Lebanon and Israel?
Now, first, it's really difficult to get an independent picture here. There's a gag order on the Israeli media to report on any troop movements in southern Lebanon. So all the news we get here is also news from Hezbollah. They're talking about a fierce resistance. They're saying that they detonated a bomb in the middle of a Golani brigade. That's an Israeli elite unit, creating casualties. We don't know dead or injured, but there was a rescue operation going on, it seems, from the Israeli army to bring the soldiers back home. And other claims, for example, that they shot an anti-tank missile against an Israeli tank, and several other areas where they engaged the Israeli army. The picture we have, it's not an easy walkover for the Israeli army right now, but as I said, not much information, and especially no independent information we're getting here.
OK, thanks for that, Karim. Journalist Karim El-Gawhary in Beirut.
You're welcome.
Back to the Middle East, and Lebanon is the latest front in the escalating conflict there. Israel says it's fighting what it calls Iran's axis of evil. Since the start of the war in Gaza, almost all Iran-backed groups have stepped up their attacks on Israel, as well as Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. They include the Houthis in Yemen. Elsewhere in the region, Tehran has been relying on the support of its traditional ally, the Syrian government, as well as armed Shia militias in Iraq. Let's take a closer look at this with Kamran Matin, who lectures in international politics at the University of Sussex in the UK. Welcome back to DW. How strong is Hezbollah at the moment, given that so many layers of its leadership have been killed and indeed their communication system so heavily compromised by Israel?
Yes. Indeed, I mean, the blows which Israel has inflicted on Hezbollah's leadership is quite unprecedented in terms of communication problems following the pager and walkie-talkie explosions, in terms of attacking Hezbollah's arms depots and communication lines and so on. Nevertheless, at least Iranian backers of Hezbollah claim that all fallen commanders have been replaced. And at the moment, there is a shift in the battlefield because Israel has sent ground troops into southern Lebanon. And that means that the absolute air superiority of Israeli army is no longer quite at work. And as we have seen today and yesterday, there have been already quite a few casualties among troops, and this is because southern Lebanon is quite rugged terrain, and Hezbollah has been for decades being dug in those places, has underground tunnels, and of course in close combat situation, air superiority to some extent is nullified. So I think the battle is difficult for Hezbollah given those blows, but in the southern Lebanon they might put up resistance more than what we have seen so far. OK, so Israel is in southern Lebanon, essentially to clear out Hezbollah so that Israeli citizens can return to the north of the country. How successful can an exercise like that be, wiping out Hezbollah in Lebanon and indeed Hamas in Gaza, when we're talking about organisations that aren't just military but social and cultural as well? That's absolutely true. It's very difficult, and this is not the first time Israel is trying to do so. Israel was already invading Lebanon in 1982, which was eventually forced to withdraw in 2000, largely due to Hezbollah's action. Then again in 2006, we had that 34 days war, which reached a stalemate, and now again. So the precedent is not so promising for Israel, but this time around, it seems that because of the 7 October shock and the level of readiness of Israeli society for casualty, Israeli army might try to, basically unofficially occupy southern Lebanon up to Litani River, right, so that northern communities of Israel are out of range of Hezbollah attack. But that has to be seen. As I said, there has already been clashes and Israelis have suffered casualties in the southern Lebanon.
Where would you say Iran is most vulnerable to Israeli retaliation?
I think the nuclear facilities are deep underground, many of them, so it might be quite difficult for Israel on its own to destroy them. And even then, it would just put back by a few years Iran's project, because Iran has already have the know-how and technology and so on. But oil facilities and energy facilities of Iran are quite exposed. And as a oil rentier state, Iranian state relies heavily on export of oil. And if that's somehow suspended, that will be combined with the sanctions, massive sanctions, which are imposed on Iran already. So the combination of the two would strangle the Iranian economy, and politically Iran is also very fragile, so extra economic pressure might lead to domestic upheaval. But then attack on oil facilities would also make oil prices higher, and that's not good for Biden campaign in the election year. So one has to see how US and Israel kind of agree on a course of action which doesn't damage the Biden and the Democrats in the elections as well as in the region.
Thanks for walking us through that. Kamran Matin from Sussex University in the UK.